Good day to one and all. I hope you're all good. Today we are joined by Mpho Manamela, who's an LLB student, a law student. He's doing his third year. He's an ANC activist and he's also a public speaker, as an outspoken person. Good day, sir.
Good day to you and your viewers at home.
How are you doing, sir?
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure having you. Can you please give us a quick background about yourself for someone who's watching this video?
Well, like you've said, I'm Mpho Manamela. I was born and raised in Soweto. I'm an LLB student and I'm politically conscious.
Thank you, sir. Today's topic will be about the post-pandemic action plan. As you all know, South Africa is experiencing a high number of unemployment rate. Concerning this pandemic, the unemployment rate will be higher after this pandemic. So, sir, can you please give us a quick background about this topic? For someone who might ask what this topic is all about.
Well, the post-pandemic action plan is a plan that government must unfold in order to alleviate the unemployment rate in our society. Well, firstly, government has been preaching promises
since 1994.
Yeah, right. They've been preaching promises, telling the nation that they are going to create jobs within a particular period of time, and a certain amount of jobs. However, what they have not told us is how they are going to create this job, an action plan to show us their preparedness for this crisis. Well, as you know, our nation is reluctant at holding our leaders accountable. And you know very well that South Africa uses a system of representative democracy, where we elect leaders to represent us at national government, at provincial and local government. However, these leaders lead as if they are leading themselves. They lead as if we are not the ones that elected them into office. Which means they are there furthering their own agendas instead of carrying out our marching orders, because it is us, the nation, that must give them marching orders. It's democracy. We are the ones that elected them.
Yes. Okay, so can I ask you some of the questions?
Right.
Okay, what are some of the obstacles that are standing on the way of government of creating jobs?
Okay, well, before I go there, let me take you back a bit. It is a pure logic that the unemployment rate is going to revolt radically
after this pandemic,
post-pandemic, yes. And it's going to take our society 5 steps backwards in terms of job creation and economic growth. Furthermore, it does not help for us to sit and complain and point out the government's weaknesses.
We should be helping the government.
Instead, we should come up with solutions, ideas that are going to take us out of this crisis. Well, I admire government's response in the fight against coronavirus. That we must applaud them. However, particularly what I admire is their legislative muscle, the way they've used their legislative muscle to control the spread of coronavirus. Likewise, government can also use their legislative arm to create employment. They can use their legislative arm to take us out of this crisis. Right. Now, going back to the question, I think government's biggest obstacle in creating jobs is legislation. Now, legislation.
How can you explain to legislation to someone who's not doing that?
Well, legislations are laws that are enacted and that are created by our legislative arm of the state. The state has 3 arms, which is the legislative arm, the executive, and the judicial. So the legislation are laws created by parliament and provincial legislatures and local government municipalities and so on. So why some might be wondering why I say legislation is government's biggest obstacle in creating jobs. You see now, the thing is, current legislations have been created and they've been amended during the time or during the course.
Yes.
But now, the current legislations are not conducive to create
jobs,
employment. They are not conducive. Why do I say so? They need to be amended. They need to be modified in order for companies to be friendly to the idea of employment. How does that happen? Government amends. Parliament must amend the corporate income tax laws in our country, which means that they will amend them in such a way that they will motivate the private sector to come into play in terms of creating jobs. Now, if government gives companies that employ a certain number of our youth and train them and gives them a tax break, that tax break can be used to pay the salaries of these young people.
And give them some training.
Right, it will give them some training. Now, which will mean that it will also help in funding, because companies are suffering. Companies will suffer. They will not afford to pay a huge scale of salaries. So government must give them a tax break, and these monies can be used to pay these particular young men and women. And the private sector must be pushed, and government must be pushed as well by our nation. Government must push our nation. Furthermore, there are various ways government can use as action plans to create this employment. They should also amend procurement legislations in our country. It is sad but true that our tender systems and procurement legislations are favorable to a few people. They are favorable to a few people and large corporations.
And what about the small businesses?
Right. That is where small business comes in now. Legislative procurement laws must be amended in such a way that when a tender is issued, it should be issued to a corporation, a large corporation, of course, because they have the experience
and the resources.
So it should give out the tender to the large corporation in cooperation with small businesses. Now, this tender must be shared amongst two companies, the big company and the small company, where the small company will benefit in terms of expertise, experiences it will learn from this large corporation, as well as employ several youth members in our society. Now, they stand to benefit. Now, the good part of this is that if you look at infrastructure, government must unfold an infrastructure plan, a strategic infrastructure plan. You go to Eastern Capes, the roads are terrible. The roads are terrible. People cannot travel for economic activities.
Because I believe infrastructure is one of the keys to developing economy.
Right. So now, when government unfolds an infrastructure plan and hands out these tenders to fix these roads, and these tenders are shared amongst a large corporation and a small corporation, it will ensure that these small corporations are ready in terms of getting expertise in order to execute these tenders in future.
True.
Now, let me tell you the true value of this. Now, it's obvious people are going to benefit. Small and big companies are going to benefit. People will be employed, and our country will be developed in terms of infrastructure. Right.
Okay. The next question, or do you still want to continue?
No. Let me go on. Pardon for that. Well, SA must also ensure proper relief measures in the agriculture sector, in the farming, particularly farming. I'll use farming because it's easy to illustrate the idea I'm about to base. So, farming, government must come up with measures to fund these farmers, to give them resources. Particularly these black small farmers who do not have the opportunity to produce and supply big corporations like Pick n Pay and ShopRite. So particularly government must help those farmers and must give land to people who want to farm. It must make land accessible
to farmers.
So that jobs can be created. Jobs can be created, and our economy can get on its feet again.
Because the primary sector is one of our, that's where most of our income comes from the primary sector, which is farming, one of the...
Right. So government must be aware that an action plan must be unfolded to deal with this crisis sector by sector. Each and every sector of the economy must have a plan. Now, our government is good in planning policies, like the National Development Plan. But the problem is execution.
That's a big
government
problem.
fails to implement
those actions.
Right. That is why I plead with the nation of our society, the nation to push government to come up with an action plan. The State of the Nation address that was delivered, the latest, it was good, but it lacked an action plan. We need an action plan.
Okay, can I go to the next one? Okay. What can government do differently to fast track the economic growth and employment?
Well, government must, like I've said, the government must enhance and come up with an infrastructure plan.
As I've said earlier.
Right, and come up with an action plan that is going to deal with sectors by sector to sector basis. Now, government is reluctant. Government has been promising
people jobs,
right?
94.
Right. So, going back to the question,
what can they do differently?
What can they do differently
to fast track the economic growth and employment?
Right. Government must implement. Government must stop. It must stop coming up with policies that they're not going to implement. It does not make sense for government to come up with policies and neglect them in the process. So my argument is that government must come up with an action plan that will ensure, because they have not come up with an action plan. So coming up with an action plan is different from what they are doing. They must come up with an action plan and execute it and not neglect it in any way.
Okay, thanks. Okay, the next question: how can a legislature contribute to job creation?
Well, it's simple. If legislation is changed or it's amended in such a way, like I've said,
tax relief,
like a tax relief or tax breaks, it will encourage companies and the private sector to come to play. Private sectors will see the need that they also understand we are in a crisis. I mean, you should look. Unemployment is a crisis equal to the coronavirus because it is swept in our society and it has swept out our youth. If you look, our unemployed youth are using drug substances, to cope with this stress and right, because they cannot provide. They are not of value at their homes. So it is time government comes to play and changes these social-economic issues. I mean, if you look closely, if you look at the Mpho crisis in Soweto particularly, government is not doing anything about it. Government is not doing anything about it. And why? I feel like if this Mpho thing was to affect suburbs, was to affect Richard Square Mile, if that drug was to affect that society, government would have enacted immediately. They would have done so immediately. So in a way,
in the township they're not doing anything.
Yes, in the township there is nothing that is happening. They are not taking steps. So you ought to take it upon yourself to help government in ideas and in plans. We ought to give them plans that can help them change whatever they can change.
Okay, so I've heard you talking about the tax relief. Who do you think when this thing is implemented, who should get the first preference when it comes to unemployment, because usually they usually want experience from young people. And how do they expect young people to get any experience without giving them any opportunities? How can we deal with that?
Now, you see now, Mpho, our biggest industry in this country is our financial industry. It's the financial industry. Why do I say so? It's because banks employ a huge scale of people. Banks employ a huge scale of people. However, they also want people who are skilled. And like you said, people are not skilled. So how this is going to work is that people will be trained. People will be trained. They will go through something like an internship, where the monies that we're supposed to pay these particular taxes can be diverted into training these people and giving them a stipend up until they are qualified, and they can move into employment. And when they are employed, the process of deviating monies that were supposed to be allocated for tax to salaries will still continue. Government will also try to help these corporations have the financial masses to employ our masses of our people.
I think this is what our government should consider, and I hope politicians who are watching this will take this front to Parliament and fight this. Do you think our SOEs are contributing, our state-owned companies like ESCOM, SAA, and you see now those companies are in major crisis now, financial crisis. Are they contributing in the economic growth?
Well, I think our SOEs are paralyzed. They are paralyzed because of various reasons. One of them being corruption. But it does not help for us again to complain about this corruption without coming up with an action plan. So SOEs are struggling. We must bear in mind that they have been collapsing for the past few months, for the past years, and they have been collapsing, and they have been exhausting state coffers, particularly the treasury. They have received various bailouts, and they are still suffering. Those monies that were allocated to these entities are not serving their purpose. So, government must come up with a strategic plan where a company like SAA, for instance, a company like SAA comes into a public-private partnership with a private sector. Well, public-private partnerships that must be implemented by state-owned entities will ensure that the government works hand in hand with willing investors from the private sector. Now, what will this mean? It will mean that a particular number of delegates that will represent government on the board of the company, and a particular number of the private sector that will represent the private sector on that board will ensure that they work hand in hand in the control, in the functioning, and in the operational functions of the company. They will work hand in hand, which will ensure that there's accountability, and the risk of collapsing is minimized. The companies will be profit driven. However, government will be a part of this. Why do I say a partnership? If government sells these entities, we are going to suffer.
Especially the middle class and the poor.
These entities are like a spine of our economy. Why do I say so? If SAA particularly is sold to a private sector, it means me and you will not afford to take a flight, a domestic flight for the matter. And if ESCOM is owned by a private sector, it will mean that me and you will not afford to buy electricity.
Already electricity is a crisis,
and it's expensive. It's a crisis. So a partnership will work. It will deal much better with also our socio-economic issues. People will be employed, people will be skilled, and it will take us forward.
This thing of nepotism will come to an end.
It will come to an end because it is time that the government actually takes a seat and listens to us. It is time that government takes marching orders from us, the nation, because they have not been doing well on their own. When they come up with their own marching orders, they take us down. Yes, so there is, hence I say they are leading themselves. We must give them marching orders.
Okay, so the last question, do you think financial education will help to create employment?
Well, financial education is critical. It is critical in the sense that it should be implemented, or it should be produced in the basic education system of our country, where grade 10s or matriculants are taught financially on how they can invest, on how they can start up companies. There's studies like business studies in schools, but they do not really teach you
the practical
side of opening and running up a business. So it will ensure that our youth, particularly our youth, because they are the future leaders of this country, and they are the ones that can help take this economic crisis into a better condition. So financial education must be taught in schools. Children must learn, they must know how to invest, they must be exposed to the financial industry from school before they even reach a tertiary level. That will ensure that we create jobs.
It will also help our economy in terms of cash injection.
Yes, right. There will be investments.
Okay, thank you, sir, for sharing this day with us. What would you like to say to the viewers, your last few points or anything?
Well, in conclusion, I'll say my favorite quote: if the mind is weak, the body will suffer. Now, I also plead with our nation, our youth, that those ideas that they are pitching on corners of the streets, they should put them on platforms and like this, so that the government can also get ideas as to how to change their ways or how to do things differently. I also plead with our taxpayers to push government to implement and come up with an action plan.
Okay, where can people find you on social media?
Well, I'm on Instagram. My handle is IM_Mpho_M, and I'm on Facebook by the name of Mpho Manamela.
Okay, thank you guys. Thank you. I hope you're gonna learn a lot from this episode. Today we had Mpho Manamela. Let me give you his profile again. He's an ANC activist, LLB student, and a public speaker. I hope you learned a lot from this episode. Thank you.
Thank you.